Hey everybody, hope y'all are doing good. I think you saw a video I made the other day throwing a black bucktail jig. This is a special bait for me right here. This is where jig fishing started for me right here. And jig fishing as we know it used to not exist. It's going to be a little longer video than I normally do, as I got a lot to tell on this story. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I like to fish the bait. But my dad's team partner that he fished with in most all my life as I was growing up was a guy by the name of Hewlin Nations. And you've heard of his name before because I own his old boat. That's the boat I fish out of. He bought that boat new in 1986. And so lots of memories here I'm talking about. But Hewlin was a pioneer in the art of fishing a jig and frog in the late 70s going into the 80s. You see, this wasn't a thing back then. This was just starting to happen at that time, and Hewlin was a master of it. Him and a handful of other guys around our area, and up in Missouri, Dick Collier, and Bob Carnes here in our area, the inventor of the Arky jig, and a couple other guys down around Little Rock at Greer's Ferry, Ouachita area, were really great jig fishermen as well. There was a great article in Bassmaster years and years ago about this handful of guys and jig fishing because it was new. See, there wasn't rubber and there wasn't silicone, and Bob being the inventor of the Arky head, that was the first. He invented that head, so it was the thing. It wouldn't hang. It worked great. I mean, it hadn't been done yet. And I got to grow up right alongside as a little boy standing there watching all this happen. And I got to learn how to fish a bucktail jig from the masters. My dad was amazing at fishing a jig. Hewlin was amazing at fishing a jig. Bob. And so I learned how to fish a jig. The first money I ever won in my life as a little kid was on a black bucktail jig with 11 pork frog on it that I won all on my own. It was a special bait. I still throw it a lot today. I've never quit throwing it. When I grew up with Hewlin, he had a unique way of fishing a jig, and Hewlin threw it on a 6.5 foot graphite spinning rod with a Mitchell 300 or 900 spinning reel with 8 to 12 pound test line. And he would swim that jig through trees, like deep timber. These lakes back in the early days had all this timber in them, and you could take a jig like this and just swim it through those trees, and those big bass loved it. He won an IBA championship on the World Championship on Table Rock. He won the Arkansas State Championship on Greer's Ferry. This was all, late 70s, early 80s. But all on jig and frog. Again, it didn't exist back then. It was just coming on. Had Uncle Josh pork frog on there. And we used to fish a number of other things on it, split tail eel or a spring lizard at times. But day in and day out, just 11 pork frog. Now we use the plastic Zoom ones. But man, I was right there for all that. And I'm a lucky guy. Holy cow. Ain't that crazy? But anyway, I still fish one a lot. Other day, I love fishing one in the wintertime and the late summer, early fall, when the fishing gets a little icky, a little tough, fish don't want something. And bucktail's got some really unique characteristics that make it the right bait for these kind of situations. When you need something that's not real invasive, you need something that you can really control, and bucktail does that. You see, a bucktail jig, it's silicone and rubber. When it's going through the water, it kind of billows. So it catches a lot of water, and you get some resistance when you're pulling that. Like you're going to lift it up over a limb or hop it on the bottom. or even just swim it. You kind of get some resistance against that skirt because it's trying to flare and you're trying to pull it back down. And every time you let off, it's, a bucktail won't do that. Bucktail pretty well keeps the shape it has, or it'll tend to stream down, line down just a little bit. If you're moving it, it's going to suck in around that center and around your trailer and be kind of streamlined. It has a really fluid motion when it moves. And when you stop it on the bottom, it doesn't flare out big. It pretty well keeps its shape. And when you're dealing with these finicky fish, they really like that sometimes. Those fish the other day, I was fishing in water that was 40 degrees, and I was just inching that jig along the bottom. And when you don't have that resistance against all that skirt and the trailer, you can really feel everything that's going on with that bait. And like the other day when I talked about that bite, it was just so subtle. I was able to just creep that bait along the bottom, and then I was able to feel that just ultra slight little motion because there was nothing else resisting against the bait. And if anything happens, you know it. And I fish this jig a lot real deep in 30, 40 feet of water at times because I can really feel it along the bottom. Also skip this bait around boat docks a lot. You can swim it by around those when you're following a lot of other guys, or fish it on the bottom. For me, it's kind of one of those confidence things because I know I'm throwing a bait that's, there is a cult following around here with bucktail jigs, but still it's not like a silicone jig or a rubber jig where everybody's throwing one. I prefer the ones what I call a muddler collar. Like nowadays, that's how my company I have, we sell them. It's called a muddler jig, and it's got you can kind of see the flared up collar around that, and the bucktail's kind of butched off a little bit. This is a really great jig for smallmouth, the 10 killer and bull shoals. They really like this particular profile. The rest of the time I use more of a conventional jig, kind of like more like an old Arky jig, is really where you kind of have the little bit longer hair on there and a more Arky style head. This is my jig, but with what I call a muddler collar, where the collar will flare out. I really like that jig compared to, in the old days, they were like this jig with the tied down collar. These still work too, but I've just got where I like this other one better. But either one of these are both great jigs around our area, and they're really great jigs anywhere. So cool stuff. I like to fish it with I'm still, as y'all know, I'm an old school guy. About all I ever throw on one is just a small salty chunk from Zoom. And you can mix up the colors. I love black on black. I like black with a green pumpkin if I want some colors, or even a black with blue sometimes. A brown one with an orange on there is awfully good if you're fishing for smallmouth over in bull shoals and 10 killer, or a brown jig with a green pumpkin trailer, or an olive color is awfully good. These work really well with a twin tail as well, like a Yamamoto. Works really well on these. Just slide it up on there a little bit. I'm always careful if I use a twin tail. I don't want to flare that skirt out too big, even though there are times with smallmouth, man, you can push that up on there, it flares the skirt out all poopy. And I mean, smallmouth, they're different fish anyway. They kind of like that. But for the most part, I keep it just like that right there. Just a nice fluid bait that I can fish. Normally I throw a 3/8 the majority of the time, or half is nowadays. I use it on a 6.5 foot bait caster with 12 to 20 pound line, depending on how heavy the cover is, but most times probably about 15. I'm just normally skipping this or casting it to a bluff line or something like this. A great bait to fish bluffs with. It's really just going fishing. It's kind of like old Texas rig fishing. You just go fish. You don't get too technical with it, and it will catch them. Just a simple old bait from a simpler time. Man, I'm lucky I got to be a part of this morphing into everything it's been. Later on we got living rubber, which was just amazing. Then we got silicone and all the new colors, and this one's kind of faded away. There's not many people make these. I sell a whole lineup of bucktail jigs through Arkansas Custom Tackle. Arky Jigs still makes a bucktail jig. And there's another gentleman in our area. There used to be a lot of them, but a guy by the name of Gary Morris, he still builds a bucktail jig. He's been building bucktail jigs in our area since 1968. That's been a couple days ago. He's 80-something years old, still ties jigs all the time. Great gentleman. Another great story right there with the company, just like the Arky Jig story. If you ain't gonna buy jigs from me, buy them from one of them. We're keeping this old thing alive around here in the Ozarks, and who knows? It might even work in your area. I love this old thing. Hope y'all have a good evening out there. I'm so lucky. Man, I've had a good life, folks. We'll catch y'all later.